Toys are for play, but tech is for everything.
Woody, Buzz, and the gang are back in theaters for Toy Story 5, a fourth sequel to Pixar's flagship franchise that proves no matter how well you wrap up a story, there's always room for one more. This time, the now very antique toys are faced with their most dangerous challenge yet: screen time. But how necessary was this sequel? And how can the brain trust behind Pixar successfully pull these toys out of the attic again? I'm Clint Gage, and my kids and I went to see Toy Story 5. Here's our review.
I want to talk to you, Device.
Please, call me Lily.
Me and the toys have been working all summer to try and get Bonnie to make friends, but then you had to ruin it.
Right off the bat, I can say the movie does Pixar proud in the visual department. It isn't quite the revolutionary jump in graphics that Toy Story 4 had over its predecessors, but the usual Pixar bump is there. In fact, one scene that starts with an establishing shot of the sky and trees and a school bus had me thinking for a split second that they'd actually shot some real footage for the film before kids from the uncanny valley came running into frame. Now, my son had a quote about that as well. It was better graphics with an F. He almost got it. To be fair, he took my notebook in the middle of the theater and wrote in the dark, so there's a chance that he does know how to spell graphics correctly. Now, my kids were very excited to tag along to this press screening, but less so when I started asking them questions on the ride home. My daughter, who just finished 5th grade, said it was starting to feel like homework, and I did have to remind her that this was in fact my job, and yeah, it's a little like homework sometimes. She also said every time she watches a Toy Story movie that I feel like my toys are watching me sleep, and that's why they're in a different place in the morning. Now, I want to make sure you know I only moved all her toys around once. I guess that's all it takes. So be careful playing that trick on your kids.
Okay, everybody, coast is clear.
Now, for starters, it's difficult to talk about Toy Story 5 without a heavy dose of context for the entire franchise. Obviously, it's a sequel, and there are 4 movies worth of story to keep in mind. But more than that, this is a franchise that has had 2 separate occasions to wrap up in a pretty satisfying way. Now, there are crowds of people who would agree it should have just been a trilogy, ending on Bonnie's porch at the end of Toy Story 3. And while Toy Story 4 started the conversation of why are we still doing this for some, it defied the odds and put a decently neat bow on the franchise yet again. And with even more finality this time. So, why do we need a Toy Story 5 is a bigger question here than it has been even for other long-running franchises. That is, fair or not, the hole that this movie was starting in for me. My kids, though, not so much. In fact, their least favorite entry into the franchise is the widely beloved Toy Story 3, but my daughter had one very interesting reason for that, one that leads me back into this review proper. Now, first and foremost, a Toy Story movie, and I would argue a Pixar film in general, needs to be fun. And Toy Story 5 certainly trots out some fun moments. The animation style of Bonnie's imagination and the scenarios she concocts while playing with her favorite toys may be the strongest of any such sequence in the whole series. And from a battalion of stranded next-gen Buzz Lightyears trying to find their way back to Star Command, to forgotten toys wasted in the wake of tech, there are plenty of memorable laughs. Conan O'Brien, in particular, is hilarious as Mr. Smarty Pants, a potty training assistant. In fact, the trio of new characters, including Mr. Smarty Pants, the kids' first digital camera Snappy, and Atlas, a map device that's for some reason a hippo, were my daughter's favorite characters in the entire movie, and I can't really argue with that. They're a blast. They also do one of my favorite Toy Story things, which is questioning their own existence in a legitimately terrifying way.
Oh, extinction! Not again!
However, on the balance, this movie may be more of a downer than it was fun. There's a maudlin sense of dread that hangs over most of the first half of the movie, where a real sadness revolves around Bonnie and her inability to make friends that can meet her where she's at. Now, this was something that my daughter and I had an interesting conversation about. After Bonnie's parents buy her a Lillypad, her first tablet nervously purchased as a way to help her connect with all the other kids in her orbit who already have one, Bonnie's online dynamic in a chat group goes pretty immediately bad. My kid and I talked about who is to blame for that. The bullies, who were being mean, or Lillypad, who served as an easy conduit providing access to Bonnie for the bullies. She actually blamed Lillypad, saying, quote, "It's important to know who good people are in real life." Now there's wisdom to that, beyond my daughter's 11 years, and I'm proud of her, but also she agreed it was the iPad's fault, so joke's on her, she's getting less screen time from now on.
Bonnie, screen time's over now.
Okay.
Meanwhile, my 7-year-old son said, I like how the tech took over. So, less screen time for him too, I guess. And to finally get back to my daughter's point, the other thing a Toy Story movie needs is a good villain. To quote her thoughts on Toy Story 3, I hated that the villain was just evil the whole time. Now, I thought that was an interesting take because Lillypad, for her part, is doing what she thinks is best for Bonnie, which, per my daughter and I's conversation, makes placing the villain label on her a little more difficult. She's a stand-in for the idea of technology causing kids to grow up too fast, not necessarily the antagonist in and of herself. Now, I think that's in the pro column for this movie, as some of the franchise's best moments are from villains who see the error of their ways and are big enough to pivot. Now, I would argue Tom Hanks' Woody actually represents the best version of that in the original Toy Story because he was straight up the bad guy for most of that movie. But that's probably a different video. Toy Story films also need a relatable phase of life at their center, something universally experienced, like growing up, leaving home, or letting go. These are all things just about everybody can relate to without any extra direction from the filmmakers. And Toy Story 5, for at least the first half, is very much missing that universality. Growing up with social media is a modern and I suppose widely relatable experience that wasn't around 30 years ago when the first Toy Story came out. But instead of being about remember how it can be difficult to be a kid, a lot of Toy Story 5 is more focused around kids these days and their screens, am I right? Now the difference there is that Toy Story 5's statement feels like it's the filmmakers telling us about it instead of letting us get there emotionally ourselves. The result is an out-of-touchness that is, quite frankly, surprising to see from Pixar. For a lot of the film's runtime, Toy Story very uncharacteristically doesn't have much to offer the conversation about young people's relationship to their screens, and there's not a lot of the real emotional stakes the series has been trading in for 4 movies prior to this.
Bonnie doesn't want to play with toys anymore. She needs me.
And to be fair, it doesn't let parents off the hook either. As a remote worker myself, I felt properly seen and criticized by a scene where a parent is just shouting, "You're muted," while parked in his home office on Zoom. It's difficult to take that critique too seriously, coming from Pixar, a company that sprung from the same Steve Jobs that brought us the iPad in the first place, but that also might just be me being defensive. I did follow up about that scene with my kids, and if it reminded them of me, to which my son said, "Oh, 100% totally, it wasn't funny because it was work." So, the movie does have its finger on the pulse of human connectivity and these modern times to some extent. Now, I know I've been more negative than not about this movie for like 1,500 words now, but really, the second half of Toy Story 5 is much better. A lot of what I like about it and how the movie lands gets into some spoiler territory, so it's just harder to go into detail about it. Before I attempt to, though, I feel like I do also have to call out everybody's favorite cowboy. This movie did not need Woody. It's a testament to the job the franchise has done of ending in a satisfying way twice now that he feels so tacked on in this one. In fact, it's enough to make me wonder if he wasn't even in the early drafts of this movie until an exec got hold of it and said, "Put the cowboy in, you maniacs." You could lift Woody straight out of this movie and there would only be, I think, 2 differences. Number 1, the movie would be maybe 2 minutes shorter. He's got no business to do off on his own that affects the plot in any meaningful way. And number 2, it would actually help out Buzz. This movie wants so badly to be just a two-hander between Buzz and Jessie, and it almost pulls it off. But when Woody comes back and starts hatching plans, it takes away Buzz's agency. Buzz could have taken a next step into responsibility, or adulthood, leadership, whatever you want to call it. Whatever box needed to be ticked for one of those universally relatable life phases that Toy Story has always hung its hat on. Instead, he just kind of keeps following orders. And it feels like an opportunity was missed in favor of rehashing some of his and Woody's old dynamic.
Buzz, you stay here. I'm going with them. You don't think I can do it?
Buzz, no!
Now again, pretty much all of my issues with this film are in its first half. But I think that's also in part because I was dreading how they were going to attempt to stick the landing. Happily, the back half of the movie manages it a lot better than I'd feared. From the midpoint of the movie, Toy Story 5 really starts to nail the things Pixar does best. It's adventurous, with well-choreographed and stylish action, and just a lot funnier. The heart of the movie finally shows up to deal with things like what it means to really make meaningful connections, or the distinction between games and actually playing. And Woody also starts to fade into the background, leaning into more of a comic relief role than being front and center, and surprise, surprise, the film is better for it. Most importantly, after all the hemming and hawing about what's to be done with tech, the film finally takes a stand. It's not an overly ambitious one, or even one that will surprise you, but it was very necessary to walk out of the theater feeling good about it. Ultimately, Toy Story 5 does have something to add to the conversation beyond old guys shaking their fists at clouds about kids and their tablets these days.
Who's laughing now? Shut up!
But speaking of kids and their tablets, mine apparently have not had enough of Toy Story. I asked them what they'd like to see in a Toy Story 6. My son just started yelling about needing Spoonie to join Tony Hale's Forky and his knife bride Karen Beverly. He kept getting louder and doing different goofy voices every time my daughter would try to chime in. It was a problem for a minute on the drive home, but finally, she was able to articulate just wanting more Toy Story. Couldn't get any more detail out of her than that. Maybe it's the idea that she, like Andy or Bonnie, or it would seem Pixar, just can't bear the idea of leaving these toys behind.
Nice poncho.
It's good to see them fighting again.
It sure is.
So, I'm giving Toy Story 5 a 7. I thought about giving it a 6, but it really is better than just okay. Plus, both my kids said they'd give it a 10, and if I'm going to include their quotes in my reviews, I should also consider their perspective. After all, that's Pixar's whole thing, right? Kids' movies that their parents can enjoy too. All of my issues with the first half of the movie aside, Toy Story 5 manages to pull off an adventurous and resonant conclusion with a handful of new characters adding some fresh batteries to the mix, and sidelining the right legacy characters at the right time. The fifth installment of Pixar's main event finds another good way to wrap up, at least until the inevitable Toy Story 6. That's what I thought of Toy Story 5. For more reviews, you're already here, guys. Be sure to subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.